Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is our final lesson of this course. For some, we've arrived at this momentous step. Before I go anywhere, I want to just read out and mention the person in whose honor today's Torah study will be in her honor. So today's class will be in loving memory of Ilana Sasto, who is the mother of Taya and Gabby Novik. So thank you for the sponsoring of the class, and may the Torah study that we learned today be in good merit for her, for your entire family.
Amen.
Okay, so today's topic, I will state right out of the gate, is a loaded topic. And I hesitated whether or not we should even go here. But I figured, not now when. Everybody deserves to know the truth. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn the truth. And not your truth, not my truth, but the truth. Because today, I know in today's day and age, truth has become a subjective term. But in some areas, in some circles, truth remains objective. So what today is going to be that type of thing. So, that said, I think Baruch Hashem, again, hate to assume anything. I think for today's audience, I think most of us here are probably going to be on board with what we're going to be learning. So it's a little bit of preaching to the choir, but two things I want to say about that. Number one, if you are part of that choir and I'm preaching to you, then great, I'm happy. And number two, well, so really three things. Number two, if you're not part of that choir, that's even better. Not really, but it's okay, because that's what we're going to be doing today. Hopefully we'll get you on board, or at least give you something to think about. And number three, even if you are, it's always good to understand and appreciate that what you already know. So if you have an assumption, you have an educational, you have a value that you know that you carry with you your entire life, and it's ironclad, and that's great. It's still always beneficial to give it added depth and to appreciate it from a more mature and informed perspective. So that's what we're going to do today. So with all that, we're going to talk about why it's important to marry another Jew. That is the topic of today's lesson. We spent 4 weeks. I know there was a little interruptions in the weeks, and I apologize, but we did make it through. We spent 4 weeks discussing dating and marriage, and how why marriage is important, how the basics of dating, of what are good ideas, how to get there. We talked about the definition of love. We talked about faith in the process. And now, after all that, we're going to talk about why it's important to make sure that the person on the other side of that equation, in your life at least, is going to be Jewish. Okay, so before I begin, why don't I get a little bit of a sense of what you already know about this? So I cannot get everyone's opinion here, because it will take us all day to do that. But we'll take a handful of volunteers. Just short, stump speech, like 20, 30 seconds.
I feel like I have the right to speak because my sister's married to a non-Jew.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. Thank you to Talia and Gabby for sponsoring this class.
Well, just before you go, I want to just clarify what we're asking here. I know you already intuited what I was going to ask, and that's good. Intuition is good. What do you know about, just off the bat?
What do I know about being married to a non-Jew?
No, why is it important to marry a Jew?
Why is it important to marry a Jew? Because you were raised the same way, you have similar values, and it's very important to keep the continuity.
Okay, so you're raised the same way, which means you have shared values, and it's important for Jewish continuity. Very good. Anybody else?
Judaism is about lineage.
Judaism is about lineage. Explain.
It's always passed down, mother, and also Torah reading and all the learning is always passed down from father, son, son. So if that gets broken anywhere, then you lose something. So if you can keep that continuation, that's what keeps Judaism alive.
Okay, just keeping Judaism like continuity, which is in a nutshell the word that you used as well. Okay, good. Anybody else?
Love fades, and this is something that's going to keep it together.
Love fades, and this is something that'll keep it together. Okay.
So if you have a commitment to the Torah, then that's a shared commitment.
Okay,
Makes it easier.
very good. Anybody else? Come on, can we get some more fearless, outspoken people here? There you go.
Your soul is different when you're Jewish.
Your soul is different when you're Jewish.
And I mean, yes, you could get a Jewish soul by converting. It's just different level of reality.
Different level of reality, different soul. Okay. Right, good. Yeah,
Generally speaking, all these classes you've been emphasizing the importance of making sure that your values align with whoever you're dating. And so if you are looking to marry somebody, if that's something that you strongly value as one of your values, then that should definitely come into play.
right. If you were focusing on shared values as a bedrock of a relationship, so Jewishness is a value, a high one on the list.
Probably also, I mean, beyond just being married, the idea of continuity applies to your kids too. And if there's conflicting values coming from potentially different religious backgrounds or different sociocultural backgrounds, that could be potentially confusing to the children. And at best, things work out, but if not, they could end up resenting either one parent or both parents for these sort of conflicting values that they get over time.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's confusing for the kids. So it's resentment. Okay, great.
Plus side, you always have a sharp side.
Sure. All right, we'll do one more. One more idea.
What I've actually seen is that it takes impact even generations after. So I've had coworkers who's had fathers who are not Jewish, and then when they go and date, then they're married outside, and then it's a total loss for children. So I think that it's that people say like, okay, like, oh my children are Jewish, and then raise them, except they're both generations down, it gets like absolutely wrong.
Right. Okay. So also along the lines of continuity, where you're saying how even if it's not immediate, it eventually it could make that rupture. Okay. Great.
I want to add something, even though this is not the prime reason that's what I believe, I just find it interesting, is the fact of the matter is anti-Semitism is sowed into almost every non-Jew in the world, and loving your fellow Jew is sowed into every Jew in the world. So somewhere along the line, if you marry another Jew, at the end of the, you have at least a minimal love is for another Jew. So some sort of care, even if it ends ugly. And with a non-Jew, somewhere in their bloodstream, tragically, is anti-Semitism. And that will also come out one day, whether from them, their parents, their uncle, or it gets ugly. It will blow up one day because there's disgusting anti-Semitism, which is distilled into the blood.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, good. Okay. So I think we basically have all the answers, and I can go home. You guys know it all.
We make one more premise,
Sure.
that intermarriage is implying that marrying a non-Jew is marriage, which is not.
You're saying halakhically it's not considered marriage?
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, this is true.
And that has an effect on your.
Which is why,
Moms will sue.
right. Which is why the title of the class is not the case against intermarriage, but rather
Why marry Jewish?
why marry Jewish. Exactly. We're not. Okay. Ethan, very thank you. Okay. So yes, we touched upon all the major points. So like my previous assumption that the current assembled is pretty much on board, so to speak, is correct. So I'm glad that I'm not totally insane. But that said, I still think it's worthwhile reviewing, and we'll look at some of the sources, and hopefully whatever we do know, we'll gain even the deep appreciation. And if we don't know, then you for sure. Okay. Even preparing it myself, I know that it gained myself. Just actually organizing the thoughts and putting it into appropriate terms is always helpful. Okay, so let's do it. We're going to start with the very basics. How do we know? How do you know that you must marry a Jew? Say it. Is it because your bubby told it for you? Is it because I'm skipping the first exercise? Yeah, right.
Oh,
Maybe we'll do it later.
Some people only got one page, some got two.
Okay, so How do we know that that a Jew must marry another Jew? Is it tradition? Is it from Sinai? Is it in the Torah itself? Is it the rabbis cooked it up? Like where does it originate? So, in case you ever wondered, the answer is that it says it explicitly in the Torah. It's in, you'll have that in front of you, in text number 1a. Should we start from? Why don't we start from the middle? Yeah, it looks like you want to read. Yeah.
So where we starting?
Text 1a, Deuteronomy.
That's in honor of your mother's neshama.
Man,
Oh, okay. You can do the English because I think that's everybody's first language here.
You shall not intermarry with them, you shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son. For if you will turn away your son from following me, and you will worship the gods of others, and the wrath of God will be kindled against you, and you will quickly destroy.
Okay, so watch out for the wrath of God, which will kindle against you and destroy you. Everybody heads up. So did you see it? You see where it says a Jewish man or woman must marry another Jewish man or woman? It says it right there. Shall not intermarry with them, right? Now, so the reason why I'm showing you the source, again, maybe you already know this, but it's just important to understand that the idea of marrying another Jew is not just a cultural thing. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah just like fasting on Yom Kippur. It's a mitzvah just like not violating the Shabbos. It's a mitzvah just like any of the other 613 mitzvahs that you may or may not be familiar with. One of them is the prohibition against marrying another Jew. So it has that equal force. So now, okay, now that we have that out of the way, the first argument, obviously the question is going to be why. That's what we're going to spend the rest of today discussing why. Why is it important? So I mean, if you just follow everything the Bible Torah says blindly, that's good enough for you. Great, it's good enough for you. Great. But obviously, there's more to it, and there's obviously reasons. So number one, I think the first reason that most people present to you, and you said it yourself, and other people here said it as well, is the idea of Jewish continuity. Judaism is as much as it's a religion, it's also a biological thing, in the sense that it's passed down through the blood. We'll get to later, hopefully, if we have enough time today. I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to cover. But if we have enough time, I want to talk a little bit about that. Why is Judaism something that's passed in the blood? It's such a weird thing, right? It's a religion. Why should religion be biological? But we're going to get there. But for now, the idea that Judaism passes through from mother to child is one of the primary reasons why it's important to marry a Jew, because the Jewish religion, the entire nation, will only continue if you marry another Jew. Very simple. Now, how do we know that if I'm sure most of you are aware of the distinction, right? Where in this department, at least a little bit, the ladies have a leg up, right? You're aware of the distinction, right? We're all aware of that, right? But if a child born from a Jewish mother and a non-Jewish father remains Jewish, but a child of a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother is no longer Jewish. In other words, Judaism is matrilineal. How do we know that? How do we know it? So it's in the verses you just read. It's in the verses. And this one's a little bit more incognito. You're gonna have to put on your Talmudic, hat, and we'll read it together. So I'm gonna continue down the line clockwise. So that's you with the wonderful purple shirt. Collar.
Or you will turn away your son from following me, i.e., the son, if you marry your daughter, you will turn away your grandson whom your daughter will bear to him from following me. This teaches us that your daughter's son, born of a non-Jewish man, is called your son, but your son's son, born of a non-Jewish woman, is no longer called your son, rather her son. The scripture first says, "You shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son." Then it follows with, "For he will turn away your son." However, when referring to "you shall not take his daughter," it does not say, "For she will turn away your son," because he is considered her son.
Do you understand that? No. I debated a few times whether or not we should actually read this text inside, because it's very confusing. But I figured, you know what? It's such a thing as people always, we all know this, that Judaism is matrilineal. You may as well see it inside the source for once. one time at least. So let's read it together. You know what? I'll read the verses the way you read a Rashi, which is really quoting the Talmud. So I'll read the verse with you together, the way the Talmud interprets the verse. So go back to 1a, and again, put your Talmudic hat back on. Okay, let's read this more analytically. So the verse says, "You shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son." So we're taught. So ostensibly, it's always talking to the Jewish father, and it's saying that don't give your daughter to a non-Jewish man. And it also says, "You shall not take his daughter. Don't take a non-Jewish woman for your Jewish boy." Okay, so far it's both. Now read the next verse. Why not? For he, who's he?
Hashem.
He is the non-Jewish boy that you've taken for your daughter, right? Because that was the clause just before it, right? Come on, put on your law school hats. Do this. The clause right before, and the verse right before was, don't take his daughter for your son. So in that case, is talking about for he will turn. I'm sorry, I messed it up myself. Who's going to turn your son away from me? Who's the he? The non-Jewish man, right? So the non-Jewish man who's married to your daughter. So the verse says he's going to turn away your son. So it's still calling the child your son. So in the case of when we're villainizing, so to speak, the father, the non-Jewish father, we're turning away the offspring away. We're calling the offspring your son, which means that he's Jewish. And that's why we're concerned that he's turning him away. That's the non-Jewish father turning away his Jewish son born from his Jewish wife away from his own natural religion. And but whereas it doesn't say that, it doesn't say the opposite clause. It doesn't say, and she will turn away your son. It only talks about him turning away your son. Because if it's a she who's turning away your son, it's no longer your son. Because if it's a she, if the she is the one who's not Jewish, then the offspring is no longer your son. So we're not, there's no your son to be turned away from their God. Does that make any sense?
Can you explain that one more time?
Sure. The second verse, which talks about the result, the impact on the offspring, and we're worried that the non-Jewish parent will turn away the Jewish offspring, only talks about a non-Jewish father turning away his Jewish son. It doesn't even mention anything about a non-Jewish mother turning away the offspring away from Judaism. It only says, for he shall turn away your son. It doesn't say she will also do that. Why not? Because if it's a she, the son or daughter, the offspring is no longer Jewish. So it's not even your son anymore. That's how we makes sense?
So it's just by exclusion.
By exclusion.
Okay.
Right. By omission. Rather.
Omission, yeah.
Yes, by omission. The Talmud does that a lot.
It's only determined through the exclusion. So
Through the omission, yes.
it's the omission of the scenarios.
Correct. Correct. Yes. And if you're a lawyer, I've probably used such arguments. Don't know if you are, but yeah. A lot of halakha, a lot of what we know is by inference.
Yeah.
We analyze the text and we see the omissions, the exclusions, the inclusions, etc. Fine. Okay. I felt that was just maybe it was worthwhile reading it to know it inside. Now you know why, or at least not why. Now you at least know the source, the Talmudic source from the verse, from an inference of the verse by omission. The idea that Judaism is matrilineal. You have a question?
So I always thought that it was about the truth of like mother giving birth to a child. Is that not?
That's explanation. That would be explanation why it is that way. I'm giving you strictly the legal basis for it. The source. We can conjecture why, and we will, because that's what we like to do, but this is the source. Okay, so the reason why we read all that again was this is, I think, reason number one. Why marrying another Jew is important. Very simple. Not doing so will break the chain of Judaism. Judaism is a long and glorious chain. Yes?
Only one way, obviously, right? If a man marries a non-Jewish woman, there's no chain. But
Right.
If a woman's adoptively marries a non-Jewish man, technically the child will still be Jewish.
Correct. So there's two things to say to that. So just to repeat the Rabbi Willem said, that if you're talking strictly about the chain, right, and if you can make it very technical, and Judaism is, after all, matrilineal, so there should be no problem for Jewish women to be marrying non-Jewish men. So there's two things to say to that. First of all, as of tradition, it still moves the tradition away very much. But more importantly, and that speaks to what you said, and I was telling this to my kids the other day, it's very interesting. If you go out in this world, anywhere, and you meet anybody, you meet a Jew, who doesn't profess to be religious, doesn't identify as religious, right? I'm almost guaranteed, I'll put money down, that non-religious Jew had a religious grandfather or grandmother, right? Always. Oh, my Bubby was this, my Zaidi was that. They were from Poland, from Russia, from Yemen, from somewhere. Everybody's grandparents were Jewish and religious. The question is, why? How does that work? Jews have been assimilating now, in this era at least, for 200 years, right? The Enlightenment age and the Renaissance, that began in the 1800s, the beginning thereof. German Jews were assimilating, Western European Jews were assimilating in the early 1800s. We're already like 6 or 7 generations removed from that. I mean, I don't know, do the math, maybe even more. Where are all their Jewish descendants? What's the simple answer? They're not Jewish. So it could be that generation number 1. So if a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man, chances are they're not religious. Chances high, right? The chances of so even if technically their children won't be Jewish, the chances of them continuing the chain are very, very low. So maybe in the vacuum of immediately right now, I didn't break the chain, so you can't shoot me. Okay, we'll hold the bullets. But the chances is that effectively you have, not you, God forbid, effectively that person has, because it's definitely going on. Like you were saying that, even if it doesn't break right away, even so, the children are anyways already confused. So for many reasons, the technicality that Judaism is matrilineal doesn't necessarily make a massive difference in this argument.
It makes it more important.
Yeah, it makes it more important. Correct. As far as saving face, it does very little. Okay, now I want to go into the next layer. We're going to approach this from multiple layers. Okay, what if that doesn't talk to you? And if it doesn't talk to you, that's fine. That's fine. Some people say, I'm not religious. I don't care. What are you going to vilify me and make me feel guilty that I'm breaking the Jewish chain? I don't care anymore. I don't identify as religious, or I don't identify as caring so much about Jewish continuity. It's more important to me is other things, security, is love. I don't know. Have you ever met someone like that? I'm sure you have. I have met someone like that. I met someone like that. It threw me out of the room. I'm very upset. But it happens. So what do you say? So I'll say, let's advance to a different line of argument. A different line of argument is very much like speaking to what you said. And you also mentioned it. Multiple people mentioned it. And that is very simply, thinking in line of all the things that we've learned in this course overall, that a successful marriage is built not on notions of love. I mean, love is important. We talked about that already. But rather, the bedrock is going to be mutual respect, which is based on our shared values, obviously. So then, marrying someone who's not Jewish greatly increases your chances for failure. Or, let's say it positively, marrying someone of similar faith greatly increases your chances for success. Let's read it in the Rebbe's words. I can't say, you're directly blocking the. You want to read text number 2?
It has often been pointed out that or background and share with certain risk factors of mental adjustment compatibility. Even if the two is confident at time, we can always compare criteria of the relationship with the partner. Same thing with marriage, where the three will be from the under 101 weeks and day after day, and when the background is entirely different, where this difference dates back to the scores of generations, and consequently of its deep and non-equality, the chances of adjustment and compatibility are negligible and to be non-existent. Moreover, modern science recognizes the hereditary nature of character traits, particularly superly over generations.
So to sum that up in your own words, you can take a few seconds. You ready? You want to sum it up in your own words, or that's too daunting of a task? Okay. Anybody else want to sum it up because you weren't reading it and you actually had a chance to read it?
Exactly what you were saying
Exactly what I was saying. Oh,
about
that's
the intermarriage, the chances of success.
chances of success, yes. So I want to just, unpack a couple points from this argument, okay? Number one, has anybody here ever heard an argument of people saying that you only want to marry a Jew, that's elitist or that's racist? Has anybody ever told you that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about that. Okay? And the letter that we just read speaks very much to that point. Imagine your natural language is French, okay? And you told people that I only want to marry a French speaker. This is just my natural language. Does that make you racist? Does it make you anti-American, anti-Asian?
No.
No. It's something that it's something a part of your identity. You're very francophone. Francophone. And that's what makes more sense for you. So it's not racist. It's just you're keeping within a pool that just makes sense for you. If someone accuses of such a person of being elitist or racist, I'm not really sure what to say to such a person. Or let's talk about something even more. Let's use racism itself. Let's say you consider yourself to be a very I'm the most unracist person you'll ever know, right? You are, right? Of course. So you go ahead and you let everybody know that you would never consider marrying someone who identifies as being racist. Would you? Would you marry someone who identifies as being bigoted? You have such people, right? They exist in like the dark corners of the web. And a lot more, and elsewhere also, more than we would like to think. They exist. So now, would you want to marry such a person? Would you want to go out with such a person?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to pull out some, wake you guys up here. So, and you're not racist for not wanting to marry someone who is racist, right? That's ridiculous. It's a value you have. It's a part of who you are. So if you have made a very quick and sane calculation that you are now therefore incompatible with someone who has an opposite value system, that's not racist. That's just sense. That's just common sense. So the same as there. Judaism, forget about all the religious arguments and the spiritual stuff, which again, well, God willing, I'm going to get to that. But let's just talk from a very practical level. Judaism is culturally embedded within your very being. Judaism is a part of you. It's thousands of years old. And as the Rebbe wrote in that letter, there's generational stuff that's just programmed into your DNA. So obviously you want to marry someone of a similar universe. And to say that you don't want to, and you're excluding anybody who doesn't, it's not racist. It's just common sense. That's number one. I want another point. Another point I want to bring is that a lot of times, especially in today's culture, as we increasingly assimilate into our host culture, so in this case, in the modern Western culture of the United States, some people may think that their Jewish identity is no longer a hallmark feature of who they are. It's no longer who I am. I'm not, I can understand that from my parents, I can understand some from my friends, some other people. Judaism is a very strong part of the identity, so it only makes sense to keep it in that pool. But what if I'm not within that pool anymore? I don't consider myself, I don't identify as such. So that's a valid question. And I want to bring out 2 points into that equation. That is number one, and I know you may not like to hear this, but this is the reality is born this out, is that you never know what's going to happen. You're all young. We're all very young. And as I tell my kids, you think you have it figured out right now, but it's changing. It's definitely going to change. And so even though we're not like very young, many of you already in your 30s, maybe in some of your 40s, I don't know. But still, life changes. And things that are that deep tend to have this uncanny knack of coming out at some point. And so that even though you may not identify with it today, maybe, and I believe you. I believe you that it doesn't, that you don't, but it can. It may, and as we'll learn later in today's lesson, if I'm a betting man, I'm going to bet that it will. And I have a reason to believe why that. So we're going to get there. So to speak more to that idea, I want to move on to text number 3. And that is this notion of love, because we really have to talk about this. And I think the crowd here is a little bit more sane than the average, which is great. But there's a lot, especially when you're younger, you have this notion that love is just going to conquer everything. How many times have we heard this story? They have these 2 people, a relationship that is really impossible, but love is going to conquer all, right? There's a class divide. There's there's cultural divide, there's an age divide, there's all kinds of divides. Love conquers all. And it's a great story that humans have loved to be telling for centuries. The reality is that by and large, it's simply not true. It's all it is a fable. It's a fable we love to say. We memorialize it in many, many formats, but we really have to remember that it's simply not true. I'm not saying it never happens. It can. And good for those people who have made it happen, but 99%, I don't know the percentage, but more majority, it's just simply not true. And let's read text number 3 to that effect. That love will conquer all. You have a relationship that is inherently incompatible, but because they're so, Romeo and Juliet, well, actually that proves my point, because it didn't conquer. I mean, they died.
Both conquers all, but
It conquered them both, right? Killed them both. Well, yeah, he kills himself, right? She gets killed and he kills himself?
She fakes her death and he kills himself.
Oh, right. Next.
Love the really hard to walk in that way. We feel like we're really feeling it. We have the relationship. Over permanent, the billion, they very rapid embarrassing that was for them. I want to put it on the intentional family. Under those conditions, our background and knowledge of the relationship is not.
So that was pretty simple, right? Especially at the beginnings of relationships, people tend to make a common mistake feeling that my relationship will defy gravity somehow. And we all know that defying gravity, the belief, thinking that you're going to defy gravity is not a good idea. Just don't try jumping off the Empire State Building, okay? So, because gravity is a rule. It's a rule, and if you want to defy it, it's at your own peril. And relationships work much the same way. The rule that you have to be inherently compatible is a rule, and to think that the love is a factor that will break that rule and defy the rule is like jumping off a building and thinking that you're going to defy gravity, literally. So it's not a good idea. Really not a good idea. Rather, speaking back to the notions of love that we discussed right now 3 weeks ago, is that love is built, love is earned, and love is invested, and it's only built on a bedrock of shared values and respect for each other. So please, don't roll the dice. You can take your chances, but why roll the dice? Why roll the dice and give yourself increasing chance of failure, but you can give yourself increasing chances of success? Okay. Now I want to move on. So far, everything making sense? Okay, good. I do need some resistance here because otherwise I think I'm just preaching to the wall.
No, you're wrong.
Huh?
You're wrong.
Okay, good. It's got to be more sophisticated than that.
All I got.
I think that
So I
it's
guess-
like, how Hashem gives, sorry.
No, go ahead.
How Hashem gives us a framework, like 613 mitzvot to go by, and I know you said this is a mitzvot. It's almost like Hashem's doing us a favor. I mean, there's 7 billion people in the world. By making this requirement, it makes our life easier. Like they say, make a list, like the things you're looking for. Like this makes it so much easier.
Just narrows down your options. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I guess maybe to push back a little bit, they say that a lot of this is like a chance-based argument. It's probabilistic. Your chances are increased of success. The divorce rate in America is roughly 50%. So it's like averaged across everyone, it's a coin toss. So do we know what the statistics are for success of Jewish marriages nowadays? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it worse?
That's a great question.
Well, no. I guess my thing is like if these arguments are based off of chance, but the divorce rates are equal.
It's not just chance.
No, saying chances of success.
Yeah, chances of success
Right.
are
It's a good question. So
equal.
you want to know if the data bears it out.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So the answer, I don't know, but sorry, the answer very much lies along the fault lines of religious and secular. Okay, because secular, I don't know the data in secular Jewish marriages. I just don't know. In religious Jewish marriages, obviously the divorce rate is astronomically lower. But you could always argue that, it's culturally taboo, so maybe that's why it succeeds, and many of them really, they all hate each other, and they're just all captured in captivity. You can go that route, we can all make a couple TV shows about it, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think most of them are happy marriages, so that would probably bear that out, that because they have shared values, they respect each other, they have a massively, like, huge portion of life, of commitment is already, kind of presupposed before they even like get anywhere. So that increases their chances for success dramatically. And again, the data bears it out for sure. We can question, the level of happiness, but again, that's it's a little bit of a fool's errand. Okay.
For statistics, which all skewed, religious marriage divorce rate is about officially 20%.
Okay.
Jewish religious. Intermarriage is about 80%. So the value is about 60%.
Right. But I guess like
from religious to intermarriage though, right?
Sure.
Not Jewish.
I'm one end of the spectrum.
right, because I was gonna say within Jewish marriages, like everyone's on a spectrum of religious.
Right.
Is it just, like to what degree, where's like the tipping point? Like how, if there is a difference between somebody who's, very religious versus somebody who's not so religious, and the divorce rate is different across that spectrum, where's the tipping point? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question.
Can I be mindful of them? Like, I don't think it's just like, oh, you started keeping Shabbos and now you're not gonna get divorced. It's like, I think it's a cultural thing.
Right.
Like in religious communities, there's more of an understanding from a young age that like, you're getting married for commitment and like, you're looking at your partner as like, how can I get to them versus what can I take away? Whereas in the secular world, like me come as Baal Tshuva, very ingrained in both, like, it's all like, what can they do for me? And so I think like, it's just the mindset you grow up in and that can change everything. It's not like, oh, he's now religious, so
Right,
the chances of divorce are lower.
Right. It's not like once you make a religious commitment, all of a sudden you get the magic,
right.
marriage success.
So it's not just a matter of like halachic observance, like within your household, it may just be, it's a combination of that plus
again,
cultural.
value.
Yeah.
Value, that's the key word here.
The opportunity to spend time with one another. So like if they're not religious, if they're not keeping Shabbos, they're not keeping holidays, then they're living their own life, they have their own schedules, and then like it also like among the Orthodox, they do have Shabbos and the holidays where their whole day is centered on fun.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of things built in that make it that increase chances for success. Yes, Shabbos is a huge gift. Keeping Shabbos is a gift for any family, 25 hours not to be on your phone, just that alone can probably keep you sane. Okay.
Since you asked her perspective, the common other side of her statistics are twofold. One, when someone unfortunately is already deeply in a relationship, pre-marriage to a non-Jew, they'll say, okay, but I love this person, they love me, and we've talked all these things through. So they'll not only just go with love, they'll say, yeah, we spoke it through, I met the family, a lot of these statistical issues don't apply to us, which maybe in the end they do come to haunt them at the moment. And the most tragic argument I hear among people who were always looking to date Jewish is they say, look, I've tried, at what point do I have to give up? And just, I want to get married at all costs. And even if I have to sacrifice in such a large value system that I have, that's the most heartbreaking argument.
Good. Good. See, the rabbi came up with the best pushback. Thank you.
All the genetic argument.
Yeah.
Genetic argument.
These are arguments I've heard for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can put on the devil. He can be the devil's advocate very easily, right? Okay, yes. So I want to move on to a little bit of a different type of discussion. And that is because, yes, statistics and data and rational arguments are great. And I think they do make sense. They do. But at some point, they do break down. Number one, statistics are just statistics, right? Sometimes deep down, when we don't buckle our seatbelt and we drive anyways, we think we're going to be this statistical anomaly, and that's what's going to work out for us. So you'll have and especially when you're already deep in the throes, God forbid, of such a relationship. Again, not you, a person. So then it's very hard. You can throw statistics at someone. This is a very emotional thing. So, but I love this person. I love them. Or someone who's desperate, like the rabbi mentioned. Someone who's desperate. I've been so many. At what point do I give up? You're going to give me stats? You're going to tell me increased chances of success? Well, I've dated, 100 Jewish women and none of them worked out. So maybe it's time to go the other way around. So what do you do? How do we answer such arguments? In other words, once we move past stats, data, and rationale, what do we do to speak to the emotional element of it? So I want to I want to introduce something spiritual element to this conversation, because the spiritual element, I believe, ultimately is what speaks to the emotional part of ourselves, our visceral part of ourselves, because we all have a soul. And I believe that this is the real truth that underlies all the rational arguments. And I don't know how much this was talked about. I think it's worth talking about it a little bit more. And that, you mentioned it before, and that's about a Jewish soul. The Jewish soul is a very weird, amazing, crazy thing. And it's worth thinking and talking about it a little bit more. Before I get there, how do you define a Jew? Anybody? How do you define a Jew?
We were all at Sinai.
How do you define a Jew?
Okay.
Okay, let's put it this way. Okay, so Judaism is a very weird thing. Judaism is a weird thing, right? Most religions, and this is why I mentioned this before, Judaism is matrilineal, which is very weird. Most religion, by definition, religion is a belief system, right? So if I decide that I want to be Muslim, I could become Muslim. It's not, I don't know what the process exactly is. I never explored it. But I could become Muslim. If I want to become Protestant, if I want to become Catholic, whatever it is, I could do that, right? Nothing's really stopping me. I mean, actually, there's a lot of stopping me. A random person, right? Judaism, to classify it as a belief system doesn't really work, because there are many people who identify as Jewish and they don't believe in God. So Judaism is not a belief system only. You can't necessarily classify Judaism as a culture, because there's no monolithic Jewish culture, right? You American kids like bagels and lox, but more sophisticated Middle Eastern palates like shakshuka, right? So everything.
Why is that?
See, finally I got pushed back.
My wife's,
I mean, I think some spice, some kick, something. So there's many Jewish cultures, right? It's not a race, because first of all, race is increasingly becoming a thing of the past. Race is not really a thing to begin with. But even if you do believe in the concept of race, Jews are of all races and ethnicities. You have Black Jews, white Jews, Asian Jews, American Jews, they're all kinds. So it's very hard to pin down one definition of what makes a Jew Jewish, or what defines Judaism. And the answer is that, did I put it here? I did.
What's the first section? Sorry.
Yeah. So let's read. I'm going to skip the text 5 before text 4. Read text 5 before 4, okay? The trouble with defining Judaism. Yes. Yeah. You with the black beanie.
The trouble with defining Judaism. So Yair Rosenberg says in our Jews race, well-meaning people have trouble fitting Jews into their usual boxes. They don't know how to define Jews, and so they resort to their own frames of reference, like race or religion, and project them onto the Jewish experience. But Jewish identity doesn't conform to Western categories, despite centuries of attempts by society to shoehorn it in. This makes sense because Judaism predates Western categories. It's not quite a religion because one can be Jewish regardless of observance or specific belief. Einstein, for example, proudly not religiously observant. But it's also not quite a race because people can convert in. It's not merely a culture or an ethnicity because that leaves out all the religious components. And it's not simply a nationality because although Jews do have a homeland and many identify as part of a nation, others do not.
There's also maybe like we consider Kohanim. They can't marry certain people.
Right.
And then if you convert in, you can't, converts can't marry them. So there's also that aspects.
Yeah, there's a Kohanim. Yeah, that's a little bit of a dark horse. So
Yeah.
get that. Okay, so like Yair Rosenberg, any of you read Deep Shtetl, by the way? He's a lot of fun. It's one of the sub newsletters of The Atlantic, and he's Jewish. And it's Deep Shtetl, so it's cute. Anyways, so I think he puts it very well. It's hard to define a Jew. And honestly, if you don't learn any Kabbalah or you're not aware of anything in Kabbalistic concepts, I don't know how to define it. But we do. And you said it before. So let's read text. I'm going to get back. I didn't forget about text 4. I actually want to read it, but I'm going to go out of order. I want to read text 6 first. To your right.
Let's see. No pause on the way. In Spanish, Spanish.
Rather, it is his or her at various, the status of a human, animal, or vegetable is immutable. Declaring that one is no longer a human, an animal really isn't an animal, that a vegetable is no longer a vegetable, is ineffective. Even if the person goes so far as to deny their own existence or the existence of the human species, it still will help. It is not a question of free will. We possess free will over our behavior, action, speech, and thought, but not over our essence and identity.
Okay. Did you? So in other words, what the Rebbe is writing here is that Judaism, I think the word speaks for themselves. They're not a casual feature of our identity. They are our identity. And how is that? Because of the Jewish soul. If someone actively dying. But if you have, you'll notice that the minute before death, the minute after death is very hard to discern. The body remains almost exactly the same, right? The eyes are there, the nose is there, the flesh, everything is there. Everything is there. It's not operating. It's a very weird thing to see, to behold. What is it? What is it that one moment the body works and the next moment it doesn't? So there's the soul. Call it what you want. Scientists don't even have a name for it. You can call it energy, you can call it life force, you can call it. So far, we haven't figured out how to make a corpse alive. So far. I don't know, maybe they'll come up with it. But so far, that's still in God's realm. And it's a soul. And the original creation account speaks of it. God breathed a soul, a living soul into the human being and into everything in this world. And the Jewish soul is a unique soul. It's not better, it's not worse, it's unique. It's different. And God programmed that into the DNA of every Jewish person. And that's what makes you Jewish. So what makes you Jewish is your soul. And you can't destroy it, you can't run away from it. You can't trade it in, and you can't denounce it. It's something, it's a part of you. Same way you can't denounce, again, when I was reading this, I was thinking how dated this is. This is going to hold up over time, because the words that declaring that one is no longer a human, that an animal isn't really an animal, a vegetable is no longer a vegetable, is ineffective. You can't deny your own existence. Something, today we're already foraying into that territory, but so far there's still some things, that humanity pretty much agrees you can't just declare yourself. You can declare yourself, identify as a rock. So far it doesn't work. Okay? And I think, yes.
So, how would you explain for people that are converted?
How conversion is so the belief is that at the time of conversion, God imbues them with that soul. And really, the tradition is that converts from Sinai already, and someone mentioned that, from Sinai, they had a quasi-Jewish soul, like a sleeping one, and they've activated it when they actually go ahead with the conversion.
So when you're teaching us this path, does it mean that if we decide to marry somebody who converts to Judaism, it's okay?
Yeah. I mean, given there's a little bit of I have to put a little bit of an asterisk on that. It's better, obviously, if they convert beforehand, you met them afterwards. If they're converting for married
Jewish, so they have to convert.
Yeah, but if they converted beforehand, you met them as, sure, they're Jewish.
No, you met them, maybe you didn't meet them, so they converted well. No.
So then, let's just say that if they go through a halachically valid conversion before the marriage happens, again, simply stated, they're as Jewish as Moses.
Isn't that
what? Yeah, this is the love. Well, Moses wasn't. Yeah, he was Jewish. Yes. Certainly 100%. Okay, So the Jewish soul, that defines who a Jew is. And that's why, famously, throughout history, we've had many, we don't lack examples of people who didn't necessarily identify strongly as Jewish, but when push comes to shove, they were unable to renounce their Judaism. And we've had thousands, millions of martyrs, of Jewish martyrs who gave up their lives willingly or unwillingly because they were Jewish, even though they didn't necessarily believe in it, or they didn't pronounce or profess to be Jewish. Because the Jewish soul is a very strong thing. With that in mind, I want to go back to text 4. In my opinion, this is the soul of the argument, pun intended. The soul of the argument of why a Jew must marry another Jew is about incompatibility, but it's about incompatibility on a very, very deep level. Let's read it in text 4. But before I read text 4, if you'll notice the name, Dear Rabbi, Why Can't I Marry Her? This is a fascinating book. Just the background of the book. Any of you heard of this book? No. This is written by Rabbi Eliezer Shem Tov. He's a rabbi in Uruguay. The background of this book is that an Argentinian Jewish man was dating an Argentinian non-Jewish woman, Catholic, I think. And they had a deep relationship, and then they were going to get married, and then he ended up breaking it off because she wasn't Jewish. And so apparently she was a very smart, mature, intelligent woman. So she independently reached out to the rabbi, and she was heartbroken, and she wanted to know what happened. Like, you're a rabbi, maybe you can, because my boyfriend's like, he couldn't explain it to me because he's not religious. He just broke it off because he says you're not Jewish. But he had no words. Maybe you, the rabbi, can explain it to me. And so started email correspondence back for over many months, elaborate emails and really very deep, heartfelt. Apparently this woman is really a really, mature, intelligent, sensitive person. And the rabbi was also handled, I think, with aplomb. So he eventually collected the correspondences, and obviously anonymously, he published it in a book. So it's a fascinating read. It's a live conversation back and forth in email.
What's the name of it?
Dear Rabbi, Why Can't I Marry Her? So you can also, I put the URL. You can read most of it online. I have the book at home. The book is more elaborate. There's more in the book than there is online, but plenty of the conversations online also, so you can read it. Anyways, but that said, take a read.
The word admires you. You want to marry and live happily. It is often understood that this relationship functioning as long as they are both on the surface. Without expressing their respectively. As soon as either of them decides to express its need, the other will remain.
In your own words? Would you like to summarize it? Huh? Okay.
That line?
Which one?
That,
The bird and the fish?
yeah. If the other is
There you go.
bird come up with fish, fish come up with bird, but where will we?
There you go. So, Laser Shem didn't come up with it. Tevye did, right? Or Shalom Aleichem did. Right? Exactly. A fish can love a bird, and a bird can love a fish, but what will they build their home? Very well said. Thank you. But you know what? For this audience, he said it. So that's the idea. The idea here is that it could be all beautiful, and on the surface, it all works out, and it does. And I've met in my lifetime, very short, I've met plenty of people who have beautiful, loving relationships, and it does work out. I'm not saying that. See, I'm not here to argue that it cannot work out on a superficial level ever. It does, because I don't want you to throw me back. This is why it's going back to what I said before. Statistics, schmatistics, whatever, right? I'm going to break the mold. I'm going to be the anomaly. And you know what? It could very well be. Let's say that you, the theoretical, hypothetical you, will break the mold, and you will have a successful marriage. And by the way, as I say this, I actually have a specific person in mind. And I'm like literally talking to him. Because so far, I haven't won the debate. But I met this man 12 years ago. He had 2 little girls, his wife, Kate. And He's a Jewish guy, she's not. And we duked it out, but so far he defies this beautiful marriage. They live together, they have 2 children, they're raising them perfectly. So I'll tell you of things that I've seen. I can't tell you what goes on in the home, I'm not there. But they since moved to Boston, they bought a home. She's a screenwriter. He's I don't know. Everything seems to be fine, right? So there are, but I'm still betting. The soul will come out. And so even though it's perfectly compatible, and it may look so, but a bird cannot live with a fish. And another example, I'll give you a little bit more extreme, but bear with me. And imagine you have 2 people, a man and a woman. People, not a bird and a fish. 2 people who meet each other and love each other and decide that they want to get married with each other. And everything is beautifully compatible. And all the boxes that we've talked about in the past 6 weeks, they've checked. And then one day, on a fluke, they discover that they're biological brother and sister. Would any of you argue that they should get married? Huh?
What was it?
This is not in the frozen north. This, or whatever, wherever it's frozen. Would any of you argue that they should get married to one another?
If what?
If they discover that they're biological brother and sister?
Ooh, I don't like that.
I know, it kind of messes with your brain, right?
Yeah.
I said it's an extreme example, but it brings out the point. So I'm not arguing that there's a certain icky factor with that example, and I totally agree. And I'm not saying that exists in this example of a Jew and non-Jew, God forbid. I don't mean to say that. All I mean to bring out is a point that some things are inherently incompatible. That's what I mean. They don't work. So even if on a superficial level it seems to work, and it very well could. And our hypothetical adopted brother, adopted brother and sister will only discover it later in life. It was working until that moment that they found the birth record. It was. But then they discovered that there's a fact of life. That's what the Rebbe wrote in the letter for. There's a fact. It's indisputable. It's immutable, and you can't argue it. So go spit nickel, bang your head in the wall. Tell yourself we love each other. Okay. Could be you do. I'm not going to argue that you don't. Could be that you will work out with one another. Could be you. But you're still inherently incompatible. A bird and a fish can't live together. 2 brothers and sister cannot live together. And by the same token, because of our Jewish soul, a man and a woman cannot live together. I could tell you stories from today till tomorrow of where this I've seen is borne out, even in my own life. I grew up in Santa Barbara, California, where the intermarriage rate, what'd you say is worldwide? Intermarriage rate, whatever it is, nationwide is like 10 degrees higher there. So, and, I've seen it, but I don't think I need to bring those stories to impress this point of view. I can. I'll tell you one with my mother would always tell me that there was this lady, she knew her, his name was Melody. And my mother would come shopping in the grocery store, the Albertsons, and this lady comes, and she's in line. Obviously, her shopping cart's probably bigger than the average person in Santa Barbara. And all of a sudden, this lady from behind her says, "Are you Mrs. Loschak?" Like, yeah. And all of a sudden, she just burst out on her, screaming at her. I've heard you say things about, marrying out of faith, blah, 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 blah. Me and my husband, a whole tirade. Like, how dare you? Yeah, they had 2 kids, Ahrele and Cameron. Remember them? We have 2 kids. Everything's perfect. So I was like, okay. Listen, what can I tell you? I don't think so, but okay. And I remember Ahrele and Cameron, they came to our Gun day camp back in the day. And let me tell you, it was not all perfect. And I distinctly remember the moment when Melody had to divorce her husband. I remember how bloody and painful it was. And I remember her crying on my mother's shoulder and saying how right you were. I remember this with my own eyes. I saw these things happen. I remember how messed up, how catastrophic it was for the 2 kids, for Ahrele and Cameron. I have no idea where they are today. So that's just in my own very limited experience. And I'm sure you can regale you with stories today tomorrow. It all brings out the same point. That on 2 levels. One, for the first half of what we spoke, rationally, just reasonably, the chances of success are low. But I think even deeper is that we have a soul. It's a very important thing to remember. As a Jew, you have a soul. And as much as you may or may not feel it, and we don't always feel it, it will come out. It's there. I cannot stress that enough. It's there. I can't stress it enough. If there's any way for me to stress it even more, I'll do that. Okay, the soul is there. And it makes a Jewish person inherently incompatible with a non-Jewish person. Whether they see it or they're not, the chances are they will, but even if they don't, the fact still remains. That, my friends, I think I said all I can. Sure.
2 things. First, I want to thank Ahrele Loschak for teaching the school.